After 7 years of making these videos, West Virginia made it into the top 10 on something that isn't negative. Where do you think they ended up? Owning a home has long been sold as the cornerstone of the American dream, but let's be real, for some states, that dream is more like a limited time offer with terrible financing. While some parts of the country have high rates of home ownership, others are packed with renters that might treat the place like a frat house of underachievers and the mentally insane. Today we're going to go state by state and see where Americans are actually owning homes and where they're just renting their way through life. Got it? Get it? Good. Let's take a look. 51. The District of Columbia. Yes, we're doing the district again. It's not surprising that DC has the lowest home ownership rate in the country, and theirs is really low. Between sky-high rent prices, transient government jobs, and a booming rental market catering to interns and lobbyists, most people in the nation's capital are just passing through and living in apartments they could really never afford to buy. Only 40% of Washington, D.C. residents own homes. 50. New York. New York is where dreams go to be overpriced. With the Big Apple skewing the whole state's numbers, it's no wonder that fewer than 55% of the residents own homes. High property taxes, sky-high real estate costs make owning a home in this state feel more like a fantasy that requires you to have a $2 million stock portfolio just to pull this off. Only 53.3% of New York's residents own their own homes in 2024. And when I say own their own homes, they're not leasing, they're not renting. They might have a mortgage, they might own it outright, might be in a family trust, but you're not renting. 49. California. Sunshine, beaches, and a median home price that would make a millionaire cry. While the Golden State has some of the most desirable real estate in the country, actually owning a slice of it is a different story. Almost half the residents are renters, some by choice, but most by necessity. 55.8% of California's residents actually own their own home. At those prices that they have in California, I'm a little surprised. 48. Nevada. Vegas might be all about big wins, but when it comes to owning a home, a lot of Nevadans are still rolling dice. With rapid development, inflated housing prices, and lots of people moving in, it's tough to buy a home unless you're really quick or loaded. 61.2% of Nevada's residents own their own home. 47. Hawaii. Paradise comes at a price, and that price is absolutely insane real estate. Many people who live in Hawaii either inherited their home or they rent forever while juggling multiple jobs. If you want to buy a house here, you better bring a suitcase full of cash and a tolerance for sticker shock. 61.8% of Hawaii's population actually owns their own home. Again, a little surprised. 46. Massachusetts. Historic homes, elite universities, and real estate prices that'll make your jaw drop. Massachusetts isn't exactly rolling out the welcome mat for first-time buyers. Now, what really brings down their numbers is the Boston area. Most people rent there. It's too expensive to buy a home in Boston unless you've got some serious money, inherited the home, or you're running some giant Ponzi scheme. And in that case, you're only going to own the home for about 3 or 4 years before you go to federal prison. 61.9% of Massachusetts' population owns their own home. 45. New Jersey. New Jersey has solid suburbs, a lot of real estate, but with high property taxes and proximity to New York City, it's still a little tough for many to buy. A lot of folks here rent while dreaming of eventually affording a modest colonial somewhere near a decent diner. 62.7% of New Jersey residents own their own home. 44. Texas. Everything is big in Texas, except the percentage of people who actually own their own homes. Now keep in mind, the national average is just under 70%. And really, we're nowhere near that right now. But despite booming house markets and lots of land, rising prices in cities like Austin and Dallas have made it harder to buy a home than you think the Lone Star State should be. Only 63.6% of Texas residents own their own home. 43. Oregon. Oregon has become a haven for nature lovers and tech migrants, which is driving the home prices up faster than the locals can keep up. Renting is the norm in places like Portland, and homeownership, while common in rural areas, is still a challenge in Portland, Eugene, and Salem. Only 64.1% of Oregon residents own their own home. I'm one of them. 42. Alaska. You'd think with all that land, owning a home would be a given, but Alaska's remote location, high costs, and rough climate keep the numbers relatively low. Add in a transient workforce, and renting makes more sense for many folks. A lot of people rent in Alaska for a few years before they realize that living in Alaska ain't their jam. Only 64.3% of Alaska's residents own their own home. 41. Rhode Island. The smallest state still has room for ownership, believe it or not, but not as much as you'd expect. Dense urban areas and an aging housing stock keep ownership lower than the national average. Only 64.4% of Rhode Island's population owns their own home. 40, Georgia. Georgia's got everything from booming Atlanta to peaceful countryside, but urban sprawl and rising home prices have pushed more people into renting. Now, Atlanta brings the numbers down just like most major cities do because out in the rural areas and small towns, the home ownership is closer to 80%. Georgia's home ownership in 2024 was 65.5%. 39, North Dakota. Thanks to oil booms and busts, North Dakota has a mix of longtime homeowners and transient workers. With wide open spaces, there's room to buy if you're willing to deal with the weather and remoteness. Only 65.7% of North Dakota's residents own their home. 38, Arkansas. Arkansas has relatively affordable housing, but a significant portion of the population still rents, and that has to do with the high rate of poverty in this state. Most people can't afford to keep a roof over their head and eat, so they definitely don't have enough money to buy a home. Only 65.9% of Arkansas residents own their own home. 37, Washington. Seattle might be a tech titan, but with sky-high prices and a tough market for buyers, Washington isn't a homeowner's paradise. Now, out in the rural areas and around Spokane, it's a little bit cheaper, but they still don't have a whole bunch of people buying homes to get them further up on this list. Only 66.3% of Washington's residents own their own home. 36, Ohio. Ohio has affordable homes, a decent homeownership rate, but some areas hit hard by the economic downturns still have a lot of renters and vacant properties. Now, their homeowner rate right now is 66.6%, which for today, that's okay. That's a decent number. In 1975, their number was 82%. 35, North Carolina. With steady growth and reasonable housing prices outside of Charlotte and Raleigh, North Carolina is close to the national average. It's a place where people can still realistically buy a home without sacrificing a limb. 66.9% of North Carolina's residents own their own home. 34, Colorado. Colorado used to be a budget-friendly mountain state. Now it's a real estate hotspot. While there's still a decent number of homeowners, rising costs in cities like Denver are pushing ownership out of reach for many. Currently, only 67.2% of Colorado's residents own their own home or have a mortgage to one. 33, Louisiana. Louisiana offers lower housing costs, but economic instability and high rates of disaster-prone areas make homeownership a little bit of a gamble. Still, many residents manage to own their own homes, especially in the rural areas. 67.3% of Louisiana's residents own their own home. 32, Florida. The land of retirees and snowbirds has a decent ownership rate, but rising insurance costs, hurricanes, and affordability issues have turned more people into renters than they'd probably like. 67.3% of Florida's residents are homeowners. Anyway, staying informed is important, but let's be real, the news is a mess. It's hard to know which media outlet you can trust. If you don't know, Ground News is an app that pulls together news from all over the world and actually gives you context, like the political leaning, reliability, and the ownership of the source, so you can think critically instead of just taking headlines at face value. I've been using Ground News for years, way before they started sponsoring my channel. I only do sponsorships with brands I actually like, and this one's a no-brainer for me. So why do I like Ground News, you ask? Well, that's easy. The media is ridiculous, let's face it. Ground News doesn't just give me the news, it also shows me how different sides are covering or ignoring the story. For example, there's the blind spot feature that highlights what's being covered or underreported based on political leanings, like this one. If you look at this headline about Trump firing a Trump Organization attorney because he has ties to Harvard. If you don't know, Harvard is taking the Trump administration to court. And if you look at this little bar down here, 25% of the coverage is coming from left-leaning news outlets. 75% are center, like people that are usually right down the middle. And on the right-leaning side, crickets. If you go to ground.news/Briggs, you can get the Advantage plan for only $5 a month. On top of all that, you'll be supporting an independent platform that actually wants to make news coverage more transparent. I mean, that's what we all talk about, more transparent news. There's a link in the description area below, or you could use this fancy QR code. Back to the video. 31, Illinois. Illinois has strong suburban markets, but Chicago's renter-heavy population pulls the state's overall ownership rate down. You can still buy in many places, it's just not that easy near the Loop, which is downtown Chicago basically. 67.8% of Illinois residents own their own home. 30. Oklahoma. Oklahoma is still relatively affordable and has a solid rate of homeownership. The economy may not be booming, but there's plenty of space and fewer barriers for buying a home. I had a relative buy a home in Oklahoma last couple of years. They've owned homes in California before, and they said it was a breeze in Oklahoma. Said it was like half the paperwork. I don't know, that's just what someone said to me. I don't know if that's true or not, but sounds nice. 68% of Oklahoma's residents own their own home. 29. Connecticut. Connecticut is the land of quiet suburbs and high property taxes. While many families own their own homes, it's not as high as you'd expect for a state that markets itself as a commuter heaven. 68.2% of Connecticut's residents own their own home. 28. Nebraska. Homeownership in Nebraska is solid thanks to affordable housing and a steady economy. You won't find a lot of flashy homes here, but you will find a lot of people who actually own their homes. Homeownership is at 68.4% in Nebraska. 27. Kentucky. With low home prices and a slower pace of life, it's no wonder many Kentuckians are homeowners. Still, pockets of poverty hold back their rates in some regions. If you don't know, poverty normally equals renters. If you can't even afford your bills, it's hard to save up for things like a down payment or convince a bank you could make the payments on the house if you do get it. 68.4% of Kentucky's residents are homeowners. 26. Kansas. Flat land, affordable homes, and a stable Midwest vibe means that most of Kansans can still afford to buy a house without resorting to a bidding war. Homeownership in Kansas is at 68.5%. 25. Missouri. Missouri has a mix of city renters and rural homeowners. It strikes the balance in the middle of the pack. Not too expensive, not too cheap, just right for many. Homeownership in Missouri is at 68.7%. 24. Tennessee. Tennessee is popular for its low taxes and decent home prices. The only downside, the influx of outsiders are driving up those prices, especially in Nashville. That's not something you have to worry about in Memphis. There's not many outsiders coming in, and most of the locals would like to leave. But Tennessee's homeownership is 68.9%. 23. Virginia. Between DC suburbs and southern farmland, Virginia has a wide open range of housing and a solid homeownership rate to match. 69.1% of Virginia's residents own their own home. 22. Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a place where cheese isn't the only thing that's well-aged. Many people live in their homes passed down for generations, and new buyers can still get in at a decent price. I think Wisconsin's one of the best places to buy a house right now. Maybe set down some roots, whatever you gotta do. This is a great place to live. Just gotta deal with the cold. And if you own that home, you gotta shovel a lot of snow. That does suck, but most things about Wisconsin are pretty good. Wisconsin has homeownership rate of 69.2%. Not bad. 21. South Dakota. Rural living and affordable homes make South Dakota one of the easiest states to own property in. If you don't mind cold winters and long drives, it's a great spot for homeowners. 69.3% of South Dakota's residents own their own home. 20. Arizona. Retirees and snowbirds love Arizona, and many of them buy instead of rent. It's hot, dry, and surprisingly homeowner friendly. Homeownership in Arizona is 69.7%. 19. Utah. Utah has a young, family-oriented population and a culture that promotes homeownership. While prices are rising, the desire to own is still strong in Utah. And no, you don't have to be a Mormon to own a home here. You would not believe all the misinformation people have on Utah. The comment section anytime I do anything on Utah is just weird. And it all has to do with their Mormon history. You don't have to be a Mormon. You don't have to have more than one wife. You're not forced to have 10 kids. It's just a good place to live. Homeownership in Utah is 70.3%. 18. New Mexico. Low-cost living and open land makes homeownership in New Mexico appealing. There's not much competition and plenty of space to build or buy. That's the good thing about a state that, isn't doing great. They usually have really low home prices and a lot to choose from. You just have to be financially set to live there because there isn't a lot of good jobs in New Mexico. If you don't mind the desert and you work remotely, I'd take a look at New Mexico. Also, if you're a retiree, if Arizona ain't your thing, it's too expensive, or Florida is, I'd seriously look at New Mexico. New Mexico has a homeownership rate of 70.3%. 17, Montana. Montana's attracting new residents, and many of them want to own land, not rent it. Wide open spaces and small towns make it easier to achieve that dream. Prices are going up, so get in while you can. Homeownership in Montana is 71% even. 16, Idaho. Idaho has become a surprising magnet for homeowners. While prices have climbed, the state still boasts a strong homeownership rate. That's why so many people are moving there. And the locals complain about it. It's like I want to tell them, this is how human beings work. If the place they live sucks, they move to where it's better. This goes all the way back to when we were living in caves. If there's too many predators and not enough prey, or you couldn't sustain your life living in one area, you went and found another cave someplace else. And when they found a really nice place that they could survive at, they stayed there. California was once that new area that everyone wanted to go to, and they did. Now it's like they picked the state clean and they're moving to other places. So the lesson here for all cities, states, and towns, if you don't want a bunch of people moving to where you are, start running your town, city, or state like Mississippi does. Nobody wants to move there. But Idaho right now is one of those hotspots, and their homeownership rate is pretty good. It's 71%, also just like Montana. Number 15, Pennsylvania. Affordable homes, especially outside of Philly, helps Pennsylvania keep a high rate of homeownership. The Rust Belt cities may struggle, but rural areas help balance it all out. Again, 71% even are homeowners in Pennsylvania. 14, Maryland. Maryland may have high property values, but strong incomes and a high demand of suburban homes keeps the ownership numbers strong, especially outside of Baltimore. The homeownership rate in Maryland is 71.6%. 13, Iowa. Iowa's calm, steady economy and affordable housing make it a great place to plant roots. Homeownership is the norm here, not the exception. Iowa's homeownership is 71.8%. Number 12, South Carolina. Now, this one kind of blew me away. South Carolina has a lot of poverty. They also have warm weather, southern charm, and still reasonable prices. And that helps make South Carolina a homeownership hotspot, especially for retirees and transplants. Homeownership in South Carolina is 73% even. 11, Indiana. Indiana's affordability is a major draw. You can still buy a nice home on a middle-class income, which is something that's becoming more rare since about the 1980s. Indiana's homeownership is 73.3%. Number 10, Vermont. Vermont is full of homeowners who appreciate quiet towns, privacy, and lots of green spaces. It's not flashy, but it is homey. This is another one of those states I've always wanted to move to. Vermont's homeownership is 73.7%. Number 9, Alabama. Alabama's low-cost living makes it easy to own a home, even with a modest income. Sure, the infrastructure may be lacking in some places, but you'll have a place to call your own. Alabama's got some problems. The people aren't one of them. The people in Alabama, in my experience, have always been wonderful. Very passionate about the state, their sweet tea, and their Crimson Tide football. Homeownership in Alabama is 73.8%. That is getting up there. Number 8, Minnesota. Minnesota has a high rate of homeownership thanks to strong wages and a stable housing market. If you can handle the winters, it's a solid place to settle down. In my opinion, not as good as Wisconsin, but it's pretty good. Minnesota has a homeownership rate of 74%. Number 7, Michigan. Despite its post-recession struggles, Michigan remains a place where people own, not rent. Property values are still low in many areas, making it an attractive place for first-time homebuyers. Again, horrible winters. Michigan doesn't have the greatest reputation right now with places like Flint and Detroit, Saginaw. But there's plenty of great places to live in Michigan. And their homeownership is pretty good, 74.1%. Number 6, New Hampshire. New Hampshire's got charm, the space, and just enough New England grit to make homeowning feel like a personal victory. New Hampshire's homeowner rate is 74.3%. Number 5, Wyoming. No income tax, wide open land, and a low population. Welcome to the land of homeowners. Wyoming residents take pride in their independence, and that includes homeownership. Even though the prices are going up a little bit in Wyoming because a lot of rich people are moving there these days, it's still affordable in most areas where the average Joe can buy a home and probably get an acre with that home. The homeownership rate in Wyoming is 74.5%. Number 4, Mississippi. Mind blown. Look at that. They're in the top 5 of a positive list. It helps that the state is one of the most blue-collar friendly states when it comes to homeownership. Despite its economic challenges, Mississippi has one of the highest rates of homeownerships in the country. Homes are cheap, and people tend to stay put once they get one. And in a lot of cases, those homes get passed down. At least the property does. A lot of times they'll build their own home or they'll build a new home on the property their grandparents left them or something. Mississippi's homeownership rate is 75.5%. That is insane. Number 3, Maine. Remote and rustic. Maine's high homeownership rate reflects the aging population and slower pace of life. If you're older, you tend to own your own home. If you live here, odds are you own a house and probably a snowblower. 75.5% of Maine's population owns their own home, just like Mississippi. Number 2, Delaware. Delaware flies under the radar, but it's quietly one of the most homeowner-heavy states in the U.S. Low taxes, suburban sprawl makes it a buyer's haven. 75.7% of Delaware's residents own their own home. All right, before we get to number 1, if you're thinking about moving to any place in the country, there's a link for Home and Money in the description area below. They can get you in touch with a real estate agent anywhere in the nation. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, West Virginia. Yes, West Virginia. Congratulations. You are number 1 for the first time on a positive list since I've been doing this for 7, almost 8 years now. If I did a video on the most down-to-earth people I've ever met, West Virginia would probably be number 1 there too. But despite its economic woes, West Virginia takes the crown. It's the state where more people own their homes than anywhere else in the country. Homes are cheap, land is plentiful, and renting is more of a last resort than a lifestyle. There's a lot of people that get homes passed down here from relatives. This is big in the South. Big everywhere, but really big in the southern states. Those upper southern states especially. Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia. The homeownership rate in West Virginia is 77% even. That's insane. For these days. Back in the 80s, everyone was higher than that, I think. Well, not everyone, but a lot. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe. Have a great day. Be nice to each other.